live. Cool. Let's see. LinkedIn as well. All right, amazing. So we are live with Davy Fung. We've got about 26 people live with us as we speak.
Cool. Good morning. Good evening.
Good
evening to y'all over there.
So say hi in the comments from wherever you are. We'd love to know kind of who's online with us, because it doesn't tell me who you. Just drop us comments in the comments and say hi. Thank you so much. So we've got a lot of people. Nice. Cool. Thanks, Davey. I think we can get started. So I just wanted to start by, having you introduce yourself. A lot of us are familiar with you from your podcast, but we don't really know who you are. So yeah, tell us about Davey. Am I saying it right? Is it Davey?
Oh yeah, like Davy Crockett, one of the famous characters
Davey.
in American folklore. I'm Davy. I've been a designer for quite a while, since around like 2005 or so, starting off in print design, similar to I think how a lot of designers in the aughts started out. Moving into 2010s, I started going into what we had called at the time web design, and that sort of kickstarted this career in product design and UX, or whatever you call it these days. And yeah, previously been working. I'll work my way back right now at Meta, leading business design systems. Before that was at Disney Plus, leading their design systems across Disney Plus, Star Plus, and Hulu. Star Plus, for those unfamiliar, is our Latin American streaming product, very similar to Disney Plus. And then before that was at a company called Goodreads, which was a reading social network that had gotten acquired by Amazon. So that's sort of the 7 to 10 year back history of that, and have been very, very interested in the past, moving from a senior product designer role into design leadership, into management. So have most recently been able to do that at Disney, and still right now in an IC role, but very much a IC leadership position right now at Meta.
Oh, that's amazing. So you're actually quite hands-on then.
Fairly hands-on, yeah. So I build components, I audit components, I write documentation, I do a little bit of everything. It just happens to be I'm one of the faces on the group to be able to lead a small subunit, as we call it, of folks doing that. So still able to get my hands dirty, trying to learn as much as the tools evolve. And as you know, the tools evolve quite often in our space. So love to be able to keep doing that as long as I can.
Awesome. And what's your earliest memory of design systems?
Oh, yeah. So we used in print design, there's an app called Adobe InDesign. It still exists. There's just not as many print designers. Yeah, there's not as many print designers these days. So a lot of the same attributes that I'm about to talk about are in Adobe Illustrator. But in 2005, working in at a design agency, working on marketing materials, and then working on also like publications, annual reports, that sort of thing. We would develop character styles and paragraph styles very similar to what you would see in Figma right now. In addition,
exactly,
color styles and that sort of thing. So there wasn't any parameters around spacing guidelines. Yeah, but
Yeah,
there's a lot more in terms of style guides, page templates, grids, that sort of thing. And it was very easy to understand from a print design format when we started going into things like trying to create spacing guidelines, trying to create documentation. It was just a sort of an evolution of what we were doing in print design, since a lot of the foundations in product design are typography, anyways.
absolutely. And how to switch to design for digital from print?
Oh, working working at some very lower level positions at a startup, and really yeah, just grinding and creating my portfolio from there. Yeah, I see some people in the chat mention Dreamweaver and Fireworks. I loved Adobe Fireworks. I used that as well back in the day. Dreamweaver, not uh, I won't publicly say that I use that that much, but being able to learn as you go along and build on your knowledge base as the industry is growing. So like I love that people are mentioning some of these apps that are no longer in use, because we've evolved from there, and we uh, at the end of the day, this is our bread and butter. These are our tools, so to speak, to do our jobs. And as long as you sort of keep up and learn a little bit about each one as they go along, it mitigates the risk when we decide to pivot and go somewhere else.
Amazing, amazing. So when I created this event, I called it looking under the hood, in Meta's design system, and I think that's what a lot of people are looking forward to. So I hope a lot of the things you're doing isn't proprietary. You can tell us a little bit, about how your team is, what your day-to-day looks like at Meta, and what platforms you support with your design system. So can you give us a kind of the scale of your design system team, your components, the platforms you support, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so Meta being with a customer base of, I think a billion customers utilize all of the services from Meta, and that includes. We like to think very quickly about Facebook in America, but it's Facebook, WhatsApp. WhatsApp is a very big for us. Oculus, Instagram, all of those major foundational apps have design system teams and design systems that support them. What I work on, the app's called Geodesic. It's the business design system, and it allows customers to interface with businesses and vice versa. So all of the enterprisey type things that we build is for all of these different apps that we support. And with over 5 design system teams, they're staffed a little differently. Our team has 8 designers and approximately 12 engineers, so it's a team of 20. The amount of designers that utilize our services is it's a little fuzzy. The number is over 500. It's under 2,000, I would say, but it could be any number of designers that are designing for these sort of acquisition and customer touch points at any given point. So much different than what we were doing at Disney. At Disney, we were supporting. We were a team of 8 product designers supporting a team of maybe 50 product designers. So the scale is much different, and I would say one of the biggest challenges is if I were to utilize some of the models that we had at Disney and say, yeah, we're going to be able to provide this white glove treatment, one-on-one support to everybody, we wouldn't be able to do anything at Meta, because like there's just so many people that are interested in asking us
Right.
questions, getting in touch, contributing to the system. So there's a lot of more automation, a lot more of a team effort in terms of triaging component requests and questions and such like that. So we have an app called Workplace, which was available for other people to use.
Yeah.
It's our internal
Yeah.
Facebook. That's what that is. And our
Yeah.
team and most teams have their own internal group, and folks will just come in and ask any sort of questions that they have, and usually someone from our team within I would say within a day, within 12 hours, would get back to you and hopefully solicit some requests to pair on that.
Amazing. And you mentioned automation. And this is one thing I'm always interested in exploring with my teams. Like, what do you mean by automation? Are you automating the design to development handoff, or are you automating the use of your components? Like, can you into what you mean by automation?
Yeah, there's many ways to look at it. I think the best way for us to use automation is, so obviously I'll mention Figma in terms of automation, in terms of handoff and file hygiene, that sort of thing. We've found a lot of value in automating requests. So being able to tag specifically, let's say
Oh,
we've gotten X amount of questions about table. So table seems like an interesting component because it's probably one of our most complex ones and our most used components, other than, say, button. If we were able to tag this
wow.
hashtag table into the request over the course of 6 months, 1 year, we could see, oh, there's a lot of people that have asked about table. It seems like there's 45 people that have asked and had questions or bugs related to this. So we usually tag it by component. We tag it by whether it's a bug or a request, like just like a component or feature request. And that allows us to be able to track and show design leadership at the end of the day. This is where people are very interested in. This is where people this is a component that we've invested in a lot in, and no one's asked any questions. So we'll probably want to dig a little deeper here, and it helps us get a little bit of a signal on how well or how bad we are doing.
Yeah. So when you say do you on or what platforms does your team use for requests and
Oh, it would be on the workplace, the workplace, like Facebook group.
Okay,
Yeah,
right.
I've had a lot of success on this. Also doing you could have Slack automation doing this as well. So previously at Dizzy, we would create bots for things like stand up. Those could be tagged. You could create specific tags for when people mention my name, it would send me a message. Or when people mention design systems, it would send them an automated message. You could do a lot of stuff in Slack that would ease the burden to help you I'll say follow the breadcrumbs on what the request would be.
Amazing. So I asked you this question earlier. So a lot of these make their design systems public. I think the most famous one is the Lightning design system, Salesforce. So how come Meta hasn't done the same thing? Facebook, Instagram, like none of those have shown us, how mature the design practices. Why is that?
Yeah, it must be a proprietary thing, and I know Amazon was like this a bit too when I was at Amazon, where we wanted to keep everything secret, and sometimes I do think it's a little silly because it's not that big of a deal to reveal how we create a card component or a type ramp. I think it benefits everybody to do this sort of stuff. So I think over time that may change, but it must be just sort of a proprietary IP sort of thing.
Yeah, I thought as much. Makes sense. And do you have engineers as part of your system team?
Oh, great question. On our team right now, yes, we do. I would say the majority of the 12 engineers, so that our engineering team is 3 of the 12 are managers. There's a few full stack folks, but I think they're mostly front end focused. So it's a really good fit for us. We've had success at Disney by having someone come in as a design technologist. That's another option. But the one of the big reasons why I came here was to be on a team that had engineers with us. So even though our numbers aren't 1-to-1 at the moment, there's 8 designers, 12 engineers. Hopefully we'll be 1-to-1 soon.
Amazing. Yeah, I find it actually very useful. So part of what I want to advocate as well, in the Middle East and Africa, is design and development are usually seen as two separate things, and starting to break down those walls, and actually show our business teams how crucial it is to have engineering embedded in design and vice versa. For that, the element of what the product is trying to achieve. I think that's super important, and
Yeah,
I haven't seen
100%.
it a
And
lot,
it goes.
especially working in the Middle East.
Yeah, I would think there's great benefits, even if there's obviously there might be separate design management and engineering management, but sitting in a larger group that encompasses both of y'all, it allows you to not only, so this is like another thing that is meta specific. It allows us to write OKRs, annual goals, half goals, together. So we would be most of the time. I'll use us as an example as designers. We'll write our OKRs and our half goals, and then we would, once we get something that is somewhat shareable, like pretty quickly we share it with an engineering partner, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's an engineering manager, but I would usually share it with an engineering IC that I've worked very closely with, just to try to build on what we want to
Right.
be doing together for the next half.
Question from: is it possible to make older versions of your design system public for learning purposes?
That I'm not sure. Yeah, I think it would be very similar. I'm gonna take that question back. So one thing that I think is somewhat public knowledge is some of our companies have our own design tools. So not everyone is using Figma, Sketch, XD, whatever. Previously, Meta was using a tool called Proton, and that was a design tool that was built off of React and very different, very integrated to code, and it had uh, great adoption. Everyone was using it. We have prototyping tools. One's called Origami that we use. I
Yes.
find that when things are sunset, they are sunset, and they sort of left there to sort of continue. So I would have loved to see how Proton was made, and how we could attempt to sort of rebuild some of those via plugins in Figma, but that stuff isn't even available for us as employees to take a look at.
Yeah, for sure. Figma, Adobe.
Yeah, I haven't dug too deep into what people are thinking. I think for us in large companies, I think there's less of a chatter in terms of cost of things. I think a lot of the concern, I think, for the larger part of the design community is access to tooling. So access to tooling for freelancers, for
Yeah.
students, the cost of maintaining an account. One thing that came to mind that none of these apps will do is like Logic Pro, the audio tool that we use for like editing our podcast, for instance, is made by Apple. You pay one time, it's $199. That's it. They get off your back. You paid them, and they know they're going to continue to get your business, and you're going to continue to upgrade your Macs because you're going to want to use this tool. That's a bit different if you're a small business, if you're a solo designer freelancing. These tools may cost a lot, and Creative Cloud being $50 a month does cut into the profits a little bit when you're starting out. But I think it's a little bit less of a concern for us from that standpoint. I would say probably the concerns, some of the high level concerns, are what Adobe's investment will be in the REST API that Figma has, and the support of the existing plugin
Yeah,
community.
exactly.
That's a big deal. But yeah, it's still a little early. There's not that many waves of design news that generates this sort of buzz. logo changes, that's that sort of thing. But this was a big one, and I tried to preface it to my podcast partner PJ is that designers utilize this thing for 8 to 10 hours a day, every day. So when there's
Yeah.
changes to this tool or this friend that they go see every day, they may feel sensitive to it, and it's sort of like Slack being acquired by Microsoft. That might be, a symbol when everyone uses Slack. How has Slack changed? Currently, hasn't seemed like it's changed all that much, but
Yeah.
time will tell. Right?
Time will tell. So, question from Ian: what does your day look like for your team of designers and engineers? Iteration on existing components, new features, working with teams, consuming the system, that kind of thing. What is your
Yeah,
day?
for designers that are more interested in design leadership, and I would say managers as well, there's significantly more meetings and more touch points with folks. I think for designers and engineers that are individual contributors and want to continue to stay as individual contributors, there's a little bit more of a ability to guard them from having too many meetings. But if you're looking to continue to evolve your career, there's going to be more meetings and touch points with folks. So most of my day to day is meeting with different engineering partners, product partners, design management, and individual designers, and that usually involves either going through and triaging tasks, going through components that may be broken, trying to all the way to diving in and building components synchronously with another designer on Zoom or in Figma. So that sort of varies. Those sort of tasks sort of vary from a day-to-day basis. I would say also a big thing at Meta is workshops and getting other groups of designers from other teams to come work with us. So those we would usually try to set aside like maybe a 1 to 3 day workshop and embed ourselves with a different group. So that is something that's very exciting from my point of view to be able to do that. Oh, I lost Batsy for a second here. Let's scroll through. Yeah, let's see. I guess I could continue to answer the question from Ian. Iteration on existing components, new features, working with teams, consuming the system. The office hours has worked very well for working with other teams. The workshop being, we've also just invited designers as we triage their work. If they're looking to iterate on a component that already exists or a pattern, we would typically try to meet with them for half an hour to really understand how might we help them extend these tools. See. Renee asks, is any of the Meta design systems public? Not at the moment. Andrew asks, how does the team at Meta approach tokens, separate systems, or a system to rule them all? Hi, Batsy's back. Let's see. I'm going to answer the design token question.
My connection dropped.
They call design tokens in general at Meta primitives, which I find a little confusing because primitives, in my point of view, are the most lowest level design token. Each team has a similar token approach, not necessarily exactly the same, but hopefully we would be able to align those in the future. And those are managed usually in code.
Question from, I'm trying to find, there was a question about the relationship between systems. Did you answer that one?
Not yet. Let's go for it.
Okay, so yeah, the question was, can you talk about the relationship between the different design systems you have within the Meta ecosystem?
See how can I best answer that? Let's see. Each I would say each system is built in a very similar fashion. So we have a lot of shorthand for how we produce components and how we document them. So we have a tool we call Dim Sum that is our documentation platform. All of our design systems document the exact same way. We use the exact same tool, Dim Sum. And as we design components in good faith, we're supposed to document them right away. And as we update the components, we're supposed to document them. So most design system maintainers do that. So that is a consistent manner. The great benefit of the consistency with that front door is, let's say one day you're working on business products, and then let's say 6 months from now you move to Messenger. You'd be able to access the Messenger design system the exact same way. The structure of the
Right.
pages, the hierarchy might be a little different because it's a different customer base, but you'd be able to access the tools and the components the exact same way. Nothing should be changed there. And in terms of accessing a design system from a Figma point of view, we have a plugin that is our front door. That is an internal plugin that allows us to access all the libraries with just one UI.
Wow. And who in your team is responsible for building that plugin? Was it the engineers within your team, or like
No,
how
that is a
does coming up and
yeah, that is a separate. So that is a benefit of being at Meta, as well as there's a separate design tooling team that handles things like
wow.
that. The plugins, Dim Sum, our documentation site, and ensures that designers have what they need to do their jobs effectively. So one question that we would have consistently is like, how do we link components from like from documentation to Figma? And that is something that exists in the tool, and that was something that was likely built from demand.
Wow. And how do you put forth requests for any tooling you might need? Is that through Workplace? Like how, or do you have meetings where you come up with ideas for the kind of tools you'd need and plugins?
That would also be through Workplace, and I'm sure they do. From my observation, I think they triage our work the same way. So they look to see how many requests we get for, say, line breaking items
Ah,
or Figma links, and
yes.
then they would respond to us accordingly. So company wide, I think Workplace is the place to be. Yeah.
Shout out to PJ. He's with us.
Yeah. Yeah. Good
What's
morning.
up, PJ?
Good morning, folks.
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting use case for data, right? Because essentially you're using data and people are having on Workplace, what things are being tagged in order to inform decisions on a tooling level, but also in your design system. It's a really impressive way of doing it. I'd love to hear in the comments if anyone else is using data in some shape or form to come up with these ways of improving their design workflows. Let me know in the comments. So, question from implementing design systems at such scale, how do you balance quality versus speed of design delivery?
Oh, that's a tougher one here. Yeah. So we like to assume that all of the things that come out of our team are the highest of quality in terms of either code cleanliness or through components. So we really try to take the time to do it correctly. Typically, things aren't due immediately, and if it's something that is needed for a launch like in the next month. We're very conscious about whether we take on those requests just based on whether we can do a good job on it or not. We're very conscious of not taking
Yeah.
on something and putting out something that's not to our geodesic quality. So our design leadership and our engineering leadership are very conscious about making sure that we put the best foot forward on anything that is lives out there and has our stamp on it.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Question from Andrew. Andrew, thanks for coming on. Systems remove the creative process from design. Yeah, I think we've a lot of us have heard this. So how have you approached this within your team, either at Disney or Meta, where creativity is stifled because they're confined to using components or styles in your design system?
Yeah, I think that's always going to be a tough one. Obviously, we want to mitigate any additional items to our design language. So that was a major one at Disney that we had dealt with. Folks wanting to add additional typefaces, colors, that sort of thing. I think that's something that is more easily solvable. The question about, or the statement about being possibly a bottleneck, having designers having to come through design office hours or that sort of thing. I think we try to mitigate that by just getting involved with them a little earlier, and we try to utilize the design system as a starting point. So get them to start from a good place first, and hopefully with practice, with love, and with communication, when they're looking to ship whatever they need to with engineering, they're using the right tokens, they're using the right patterns, that sort of thing. And hopefully over time that sentiment will change. It's a little bit low rent, I would say. It's saying that design systems really stifle creativity because we're really trying to just get you to not design carousels all over again. Who wants to redesign a carousel 20,000 times? You could modify them and you could retheme them, but I think part of this practice is really trying to educate designers about themes and how we could theme something. Light mode and dark mode is an easy one to think about, but really trying to theme,
Yes.
allowing the same component to be used across Messenger and Instagram. It's possible if you set it up the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think design systems, because increase your outputting, right? Because you're more efficient, you can design faster. I would say design systems actually enable you to be more creative because it frees up your time from, the mundane tasks. And I've seen that in my team, especially at Al Hilal, where when we created a design system where they didn't have colors, accessibility was built to our naming conventions and components, everything was done, and they would churn out screens quickly. Then left us in time to say, okay, so for the screens you've designed, we single out screens that we can make more fun. So in the same space of time where you'd have delivered your time within that time frame to innovate on the churned out using your design system within obviously the constraints of the rules that you've set as a team. So I actually found it gave us more to be creative because we didn't have to worry about fundamentals because they were handled by the system.
Yeah, that's a great call out. Also,
question from Gavin. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just to finish my thought. Sorry about that. If you're able to extend your components to support prototyping, for instance, interactive components, that sort of thing, even including things like motion and interaction guidance, I think that also is a good step on extending the hand and being able to get designers to get something that's high fidelity faster. So sorry about that.
Yeah, for sure. Question from Gavin. So you design products for mass use, right? We're talking billions of users, which means you probably have a list to go by. Tools or methodologies do you use to inform decisions on your product development?
Yeah, there's a slew of just internal tools that we gather data from. In terms of just, I'll talk very basic about usage. So without giving too much about the internal tools, like one mechanism, obviously we mentioned, was amount of requests that we get. In terms of what we might like to sort of like work through, we would get data from data scientists that's on one of our teams, and would say, oh, this is something that we may want to look at. This number may not be, the number that we like, so that might be like a, time on site or click-through rate or any number of those things. And then we would go in and do a secondary check and see maybe how many support requests have we gotten from this. Let's try to build a story about how we want to influence this pattern. Then we will look at possibly into Figma to see how many folks are using this component and what is the level of impact that this may be. Then we sort of go from there. And usually for large companies like ours, we're able to gather quite a bit of data. So there's experiments all over the place. I think one of the jokes that PJ and I would always talk about is, if you're on an app like Netflix, for instance, like they're constantly running experiments. So you'll never know what the actual
Yeah,
baseline Netflix experience is, because there's any number of experiments that are run
exactly.
probably for 1% of people. So once we start gaining momentum on updating a pattern, we would just need to launch it for a very, very small percentage for a short amount of time, and then see if it boosts the signal, whether
Right.
it's click-through rate or that sort of thing.
Right. That's insightful. Thank you. So Jonathan Clegg, you were saying your video backed out on YouTube. You might be able to see the video if it's still blacked out. Look for me on YouTube, and you can watch it live there. Another question: what process do you employ to review, evaluate at Disney versus Meta?
Office hours has been very effective. We would also then, in both cases, in both companies, we would try to, if we see something in office hours or in a critique or that sort of thing, we would try to just reach out to the designers, plural, or designer individually. And that is a very good practice, because it shows that we're listening and we're here to help. And at the end of the day, we're really trying to unblock for product designers and engineers. So we would try to triage and work with them one-on-one after that. There's for our team, there's a mechanism for designers to submit patterns for review at Meta. So that is another mechanism. I found, as I've been here, there's a lot of internal tools that we build just for specific use cases. So folks will design and submit, similar to how engineers would have things that are code reviewed. So not all that foreign. It would show, these are the things that I'm looking to update. This is my Figma link, and there you go. And we would then either respond to folks asynchronously, or look to set up a meeting to see if we want to help them extend a pattern or not. But that is a very difficult one at the scale, because there's this stuff coming. It's like the mail, like it just continues to come, never stops. But that's a good problem, because it keeps us employed doing this sort of work.
Awesome. Question for now. How do you help your teams build complex that use your design system components? On those, you offer some blueprint lines, or do you leave everything to the teams?
The documentation site, ideally, Dim Sum should house how to utilize components. That I think that's another bit of foresight to share with folks. I think as you're building components, it's the utmost importance if you could document as much as you can as you go along. Our system has been around say it's over 2 years now. And the designers that have worked on the components have come and gone, some of them, and sometimes it's hard to go back and see how decisions were made for some of our earlier components. So being able to document that stuff and what is the
Yeah.
intended use case for how components are used, I think would be of the utmost importance.
And does yours have a name? Did you brand it internally?
Yeah, ours is geodesic. It's GEODESIC. It's a shape. You could Google it. But yeah, Messenger Design Systems is called Messenger
I will Google
Design System.
I will definitely Google it. Binesh, which is, I think, one that I've struggled with as well. So what you create as a team, as a design team, does come out exactly like you've designed it when it's developed. How do you solve this challenge?
Yeah, we've typically tried to, in both places, Disney and Meta, try to really follow along the process as this thing gets developed. So one thing that we don't want to do is not review, not ask to provide feedback and just wait for something to go and be launched in the wild, because then we have no influence on any of this stuff. So
Yeah.
I think much like how engineers should see work that is in progress and see what our design intention is very, very early on and through the process, we would expect engineering to share with us how this looks from as they first scaffold this component together, how this is working when you get the endpoints and all of those things plugged in, and then how does the motion work once you get that through. So that's the
Yes.
best thing that you could do is be even if folks aren't sharing, just reach out to them and ask to see how they're doing it. Do they need any additional help? Are they falling into any issues with any motion or any sort of variants or props or that sort of thing? And you'd be fairly surprised what the outcome would be.
Yeah, that's a great point. We've seen it work well at Al Hilal, at the bank I work, is the way the design team is embedded with the products and features, such that design is paired with front end, back end business. So your solution architects, everyone is part of like a little business unit. So when you have design reviews of the code they've written, the perfect time to actually give feedback and test if the component working the way you intended. Another way I've seen work at Al Hilal and Emirates NBD, the other bank I worked, is developers for iOS and Android will deploy an application that purely houses our components. So to test flight, we install this app on our devices, and all the design have access to the real time through the app. So it also tests the interaction and, like you're saying, Davey, the animation, etc. Those at any point in time and give feedback and all the changes and is added to the backlog. And it's, I think there are different ways depending on how you do it. Definitely different way you can police the code being written to make sure it's design team envisioned. Question from Anu. Question: are you releasing design documentation, code documentation always?
That would be our preferable method. So as we design components and we update them, ideally design documentation would be up to date. Vice versa, as code gets updated and the coded components and the tab. So right now our documentation has a very similar to a lot of documentation sites. It has a design tab and a code tab. Ideally, as they're being updated, your partners should be updating them as well. So there's no automation in that sense. It does update as the components do update. So there's that bit, but any of the tertiary guidance around it and annotations, hopefully there's a a good faith effort that we do that in sync.
Amazing. Interesting question from Tuliat again. Recent years, demand for UX engineers has increased. What are the potential roles have you identified to supplement the role of design system engineers in order to build better systems?
Yeah, so there's two flavors of this that seem to work very well: the front end engineer, and then the design technologist. We're in a very good spot where we're on the same team. So this sort of touches on the next question that I see up there. It's like working with engineers throughout the process. We're able to then include engineers throughout the entirety of the process. So when we're iterating on components, even if we're able to include engineers even before that, if we wanted to triage a task and we wanted to bring them in to talk with another designer on another team just to assess the level of effort. So we're able to, the resources aren't endless, obviously, but we're able to grab them to come work with us as early as possible. And that hopefully is the case if you have either front-end engineers or design technologists. That's another popular one that is getting more popular here. That both of those work very well.
Amazing. We've got a comment here from Andrew. He's saying he empowered design and build their own components, and the core design would then consume those back into the system. I've actually seen this work the other bank I worked with, MBD, where we had a central design system team for the digital transformation, and each subsidiary or business unit that used the design system had the flexibility of creating their own that used 80% of the main systems, but they had the flexibility to create 20% various cases that they needed. It comes back to that creativity where some teams are actually empowered to create a fraction of them on their own to explore this, to create new components, but consume the majority of their guidelines and documentation components from the main system. Have you seen that at all, working within different teams?
Yeah, very very similar. So they would have to consume the token layer. They would have to consume things like spacing, but we do allow teams to build off of our components, and we would, I think, from a contribution model, very similar to what Andrew was saying. We would have them either come build it, and then we would review the work, or we would possibly send one of our engineers to go work with them and co-build it with them. So it really depends on the scenario and when in the in our half the request comes. It seems like if there's time, sometimes our engineers will be a little more involved. If it's later in the half and we're a little crunched on time, then it's more of an advisory code review sort of assistance.
From a new type question I was actually going to ask you myself. How do you success of your design system?
Oh, that's a difficult one. There's a few methods. So if specific patterns attempt to drive up metrics like click-through rate, time on site, and succeed, I think that is a big one. We like to measure impact by also usage and adoption of the system. So if we see that this thing was not a pattern before, we work with the designers to create a pattern out of, let's say, a carousel, and this pattern over the course of 6 months is utilized by 6 different teams. I think that is a point of success as well. But also sentiment, I think, is another way to measure success. So like if you're able to survey your teams from a half to half or a year, year to year, and we've utilized a method. So we utilize like general sentiment surveys, but there's a method called the SUS survey, which is a system usability survey. It's a very foundational, generic set of questions. We're tracking that from half to half and trying to see if numbers go up or go down. And from that point, we would try to address those sort of things.
That makes sense. Amazing. So Stefan Noel is asking if the recording will be available. It will, so you can get it on LinkedIn there as an event. You can get it on YouTube because we're streaming there as well by episode on my podcast. So yeah, plenty of words. Question from Anu again. Could you tell us more about?
Yeah, I think there's two methods to do office hours, and I've had success with both. Right now, our office hours for our team is by sign up. So you'd go to, we have a form that you're able to fill out, and you're able to, it's the same form that you would use to submit feedback, but you'd be able to select office hours. You'd give us the component that you're looking to update or get review on. You paste your Figma link in there, and then we would schedule in for a slot that's either 15 minutes, 30 minutes, depending on how much time we have. We run office hours, I think it's once a week or twice a week, depending on demand. At Disney, we didn't utilize signups for the specific Disney Plus office hours that I ran, and that was just a different approach, and allowed folks to come in, and I think similar to like how the stream would work, they would come in and see designers presenting their work, see us providing feedback, and you could just be a fly on the wall there and attend, but while not submitting anything. And that approach has worked well for us as well.
Amazing. I'd be interested if anyone else on the call has a formalized office hours, like how do you approach office hours in your team? Let in the comments. Another question from Anu: what roles do you have in your system team? So do you have researchers, testing, CX, etc.?
Yeah, design engineers, a tier of managers. There's content designers that are on our team. So that's one that's new to me, being on a smaller team at Disney. We have data science. We have research, but I think research also extends to teams that are within our business unit as well. So they don't necessarily sit within our specific design system team, but support a larger business unit.
Really important question from Tuli: accessibility. To me, asks, Amazon's approach is UI component being born accessible. What approach does Meta take in order to have a system that has accessible, inclusive UI components?
I think it's the same approach. So everything needs to be accessible from a contrast point of view, from a screen reader point of view, et cetera. And we have our own internal plugin that checks for those sorts of things. But it's very similar to, let's say, from just a foundational level, using something like Contrast app on Mac or Stark, and getting designers into the habit of doing that, not relying solely on design system maintainers to do this. Obviously, we would like to promote that any component from the design system meets to this certain extent, but designers should be also empowered to do this work on their own. So very similar to Amazon's approach.
Amazing. Question from Isaac about hiring. So what do you look for designers in your team?
Oh, this is a little bit of a tougher one when you add the design system lens to it. So like if you add that lens of a designer that is coming on, we want to look for someone that speaks fairly well in terms of articulating what their thoughts and opinions are. So because that would lead to better documentation, better communication cross-functionally with folks. We want to
Right.
try to bring people on that are, I'll use air quotes, like systems thinkers, and being able to design across products and brands that are maybe a little different from each other. So it's a little bit tough because I think on from the meta point of view, and even like some places like Google or Amazon, you may be interviewing for product designer roles that are more general. So folks may be interviewing and then get put into specific roles based on their needs. But those are the ones that we've looked for in the past.
I love your point that I never thought of it, that how you communicate is an indication of the quality of documentation. that's a really interesting point, and I connected those two things together, and that's really cool. I have a question here. Oh no, question about office hours. So Katie is saying she has hours only for Figma components built and how to build, if used correctly. For the most, they strictly stick to the Figma build, and too much on UX. Okay, interesting. That's interesting. You're really insightful, so keep them coming. If you have a good answer. Gavin is asking, what is the future for this, and in what area or field should we look to upskill for better growth? And I think this links to the question I asked you. So I'll tell you about the future of design systems and kind of what future roles and what it looks like within that space.
Yeah, I think that it all lies on this cross-functional team, and that's not new, but it seems like there's more companies that are open towards this. So the future would be trying to level out the team so they include folks from every discipline. So from design, engineering, those are easy ones, but including research if possible, including data if possible, copywriting, maybe there's an accessibility specialist, that sort of thing. And sort of seeing us as we may be designers or engineers, but we would be individual contributors or managers. I think that might be a better way to look at it. The best thing for designers to do, I believe, is to understand constraints from an engineering point of view and really try to understand why the feedback is coming back a certain way. The flip side of this that we might not see as designers as well is really trying to understand from I haven't talked very much about working with product managers, but really try to understand like the business objectives and what we are trying to do as well. And
yeah,
you sort of start pairing in all the different areas of insight. Why are we doing this from a business point of view, engineering point of view? Why are we doing this from a research point of view? And what feedback have we gotten? And once you get everyone in the same group, and this isn't about getting everyone in the same room and working in person, it's about just having a working group that is cross-functionally aligned. And this could be remote, this could be hybrid, it could be anything you make it.
Awesome. So I have a question here, a little bit of a different type of question, and something that I've wondered, and I wanted to get your take on it. So we've seen how successful it's been when it comes to building products, and not only in the context of efficiency in the product, but also bringing people together and bringing teams together, right? All of a sudden, business, design, development, we're all speaking the same language, and we're all working together to build the same product. And I've wondered if this model work in running the right, because we've got multiple governments trying to run different. But do you think a design system approach would work to govern, like having one centralized government, one centralized rules, profiles, one centralized, and then deploying that in different geographies. We would deploy our to different teams and products. Do you think that?
Yeah, that would be a tough one. So like I was trying to figure out how to answer something like this. So based on like one of my interests right now is like Web3 and where we're going in terms of decentralizing things. So very rich from someone being at Meta, but um, decentralizing things might be a good approach. So I'm not actually sure if it would put the onus on the centralized committee to be owners and guardians of everything, and you can't really, I would say, it is too much of a burden to assume that if there's one centralized unit, maybe like the United Nations, for instance, that handles all of this, that the people's best interest is in mind, is very difficult to assume that. So I'm not sure. It's almost like if things were centralized from a larger government point of view, then it might be also a little bit of a monopoly in terms of like where the thinking lies.
Yeah, I see a lot of parallel. A lot of the things we've been talking about. Was to yes, it might be centralized, but you will still be able to give people leeway to express themselves within the different countries they are. All right, because you still have languages, multiple cultures, etc. Still thrive under that. It's like how with our design systems, you still give designers like some kind of room to play. Right, there is still flexibility. So yeah, it's interesting to think like what parallels have with the real world. Question from let's see, Bestina asking, how do you onboard new designers onto your team and them get familiar with the design system?
For us at Meta, there's various boot camps that we have. So there's engineering boot camps that are more common, I think, for other companies. But we have a design boot camp. Design boot camp goes over things like how to utilize tooling, um, how to utilize design systems in general, but we also have our specific geodesic design system course that I've recently took over to record, and that is both a asynchronous recording that you could watch. I think I did it as like a 45-minute training, but it's also offered as a course where new designers come in on a biweekly basis to come and take the course and ask questions. So that has worked very well. The I think the knock on onboarding designers into design systems early on when they're first getting started is like when you're starting at a place like Meta, you're inundated with information. So there's a lot of information coming your way. So it might be a better approach to consider doing the design system onboarding maybe on day 31, like after they've gotten accustomed to uh, what the tools look like here, work with their teams, then bring them on and do the training.
Great question from Andrew. What are your thoughts on low-code tools and their place in the design system team workflow? So this is where components, you build components and tool add to your right. For this, do you guys have internal do this? What are your
I think it'd be great from a prototyping point of view. I think if you do have engineers on your team that are able to intake that on a very regular cadence, I think that would be successful. There is, I would think, if you are more siloed, we were more siloed at Disney, where there's specific designers and then engineers, and if I think in from a sort of optics standpoint, if you're on a more siloed team and you're coming to an engineer, or let's say you're coming to leadership with this prototype that you made that is already baked or based in code, engineers may feel a little bit left out. So it really depends on how you go through with what you're building with those tools.
Amazing. So I think we've hit an hour mark, and I got one more question for you, and that is so tell us about your podcast and the work you're doing with PJ, like why start this podcast, what topics do you want to cover, and how do you pick guests to your podcast, what is the end game with your podcasts. Let's talk a little bit about design.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so my partner in crime, PJ Nori, and I have a podcast called Design System Officers, available on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Like and subscribe. Thank you. And it was really a mechanism for PJ and I to get together on a weekly basis to this talk. And we've started earlier this year, and we're about to hit our 20th episode to be released soon. And we've touched on many things. So the idea originally was to try to stay away from things like Figma and talking about very specific tooling type things, because we knew there's a lot of that type of content out there. So we wanted to talk about more, I think, very similar to what your participants and what your guests are interested in, which is more thematic things like design system adoption, design management, design ops, very more general things that touch on systems specifically. We've talked about documentation, file hygiene. We have 2 specific episodes about Figma, but we really try to go as far as we can with different topics. And not sure, like in terms of like where we want to end up. We want to continue to meet and talk on a weekly bi-weekly basis about design. We just happen to record it and edit it down nicely. Would like to continue to do sessions like this and go on other people's streams and talk about design and really open up the audience. So that I think in terms of outreach is very fun and an exciting thing for me. So thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
No, absolutely. The pleasure is all ours. And how do you pick your guests? Like if someone that's on this stream wants to be a guest, how do they do that? Can they?
Yeah, I guess we've only had, I believe, one guest, and that was a design technologist on PJ's team. So we've very much,
really?
We've very much limited it to just us talking amongst friends. So currently, no plan to include guests in the future.
Oh, well, we'll keep listening. That's the way we can support,
I hope
right?
so. Thank you. Yeah.
Cool. And part of why I want as well is, like I mentioned to you, a lot of the people design obviously are that follow me and that I follow in the Middle East, because those are the 2 geographies I've operated in. The floor to someone like yourself who's worked at amazing companies and worked with design systems at scales that we can only dream of. Really get a chance to ask you questions, work, and see if we can learn how we can actually implement in our own team. And I think we're doing that today. Thank you to questions, shout outs, and thank you guys for coming on. Good weekends, and special thank you PJ for letting us borrow.
Yeah, thanks for your time. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. And I'll end the stream now. Take care. See you later.